How is rollout in Mexico different from US, Canada, or Europe?
I've been working with different rollouts and different kinds of setups in the system. It's been part of my job for a while back. Now, the main difference that I have found in the different rollouts is the ones that are related with the legislation topic. Basically, in Mexico, we have a localization setup based on what the tax authorities requires from the companies. And that makes a little bit tougher the rollouts in Mexico other than in other countries. Maybe it is because in Mexico we have several political reasons to have these localizations very focused on getting our tax definition very straight. Based on that, systems are made or created or set up. The customizing has to be done according to the tax authorities. And sometimes the tax authorities does not care about your systems. So they say, we have to have this, and you have to create something that matches what I'm asking. In US or in Europe, tax postings, for example, are very easy to create. In Mexico, no, we have to take care very carefully of what you are posting on your accounts, your revenue or expenses accounts. So maybe that is the most difficult part that you can find in the rollouts. Everything that it's based on tax requirements.
So how would you go about overcoming said issues? You mentioned the tax issue. What are some ways to overcome this?
The most easy way to overcome these issues is first understand what the tax authorities are requiring, the tax indications, and the law. Sometimes many companies do this. They hire a company or an expert in taxes, a consultant in taxes, not necessarily an expert in systems. They go first with the experts in legislation, and then once the company understands exactly what the requirements are, then we go through the system. And that's what I do, we consultants do. We first need to understand what the tax authorities requires from us and why they are doing this. Because sometimes it may look a little bit confusing why the tax authorities are requiring this or that, and you have to go through the detail in the legislation. Once you understand this, you are able to create what the tax authorities require. And SAP, specifically, the SAP company hires consultants from the tax authorities to match these requirements with the law. So everything is in harmony with the tax authority requires. And once the tax authorities consultants start working with SAP, they create a template, very basic template that can be modified according to every company's needs. So you have to go first through the law, and then you go to the system.
And again, and this is before the usual SAP rollout headaches, like different time zones or working with crews in different languages and so forth.
Correct, yeah. Time zones and languages are always a problem, but you can overcome that very easy. So the language is a problem, but for sure you need consultants that can speak Spanish and English and understand the tax and the requirements.
Okay. Can you just elaborate just a little bit more on legislation? Name an example of, not necessarily naming names, but give me an example of a project in which there was legislation and how it shaped the project itself.
For sure. For example, invoicing. It might be very easy in other companies to create an invoice to a vendor or from a customer and receive that from our different business partners. But in Mexico, you have to be very careful with the invoicing procedure. For example, now we are going through a new version of the invoicing process where the tax authorities are checking out exactly the name of the company that is creating the invoice and the person that is sending an invoice to make the match and to check that it's not in a blacklist, for example, because there are a lot of companies that create fake invoices and those companies are in a blacklist. That can be a very serious problem if you are not in compliance with that. And another example, tax IDs are checked very carefully every now and then that you create an invoice. So it makes the process a little bit slower, but then you avoid these problems. All the topics that are related to invoice are checked versus the tax authority's database. If you don't go through that database, you cannot create an invoice and you can get in troubles, your company, if you're not in compliance with that. That's the most clear example on why tax authorities are very strict on their rules. That is why the law is very strict, and that is why there are a lot of things to comply in SAP and of course in creating an invoice.
And like you said, checked via database. So just out of curiosity, this database, is there a particular organization to prove its legitimacy?
Yes, there is a federal database that you have to check with your company.